श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम ओम सहनावतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति शांति शांति. So yesterday we saw arthākara bhavet vṛttihi phalena arthah prakāśate arthajñānam vijanāti sa eva arthah prakāśate. So in this we saw two things. In fact, one thing, how the thought function understands the object. The thought function grasps the object, we understand the object only through the thought function. How is this? This is the sequence. This is very important to understand the next shloka. The substratum from where the thought arises is the same place of the vital air, prana. Prana and mind, they both stem from the same root. Okay, that root is called as hardakasha, hrudaya akasha, the space of heart, the cavity of heart. Okay, now that is the place of the manifestation of consciousness, not the place of consciousness. Consciousness is not limited. Place of manifestation of consciousness, that is where you see the consciousness manifest, the manifest form of consciousness. Okay, now that is the place which is the base for, the root for both mind and vital air. We are not worried about vital air, mind. So that is the base. That base is what we call as anthakarana, mind, whatever you want to call it. Okay, I call it mind for simplicity. So the mind transforms itself into thought function. We know that. We have no doubt regarding this, right? So the mind transforms itself into thought function. That is the first stage. Now, this thought function, without leaving the place of origin, the root, the base, it starts extending. Like the sun ray starts from the sun, hits the object. There is connectivity. There is no gap there. Similarly, there is a continuity here also, an elastic kind of thing. The thought function stretches through the sense organs to the object. Okay. So the thought function travels, stretching, travels through the sense organ. It hits the object. Everything in this world is associated with consciousness. We know this. When you say pot is, that means that it's a simple way of saying that pot associated consciousness. When you say cloth is, what we mean is a cloth associated consciousness. Similarly, when you say thought is, thought exists, right? That thought is what? Traveling. So thought associated consciousness. That is what we say. Okay. Now pot is there. The thought associated consciousness or thought goes and hits it. The thought function, associated consciousness or thought associated consciousness does not really matter. It goes and hits the vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu caitanya, that goes and hits the object. The moment the vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu caitanya hits the object, there are two things. One, the activity of vṛtti. Vṛtti's one and only job is to get rid of the veiling, the cover, the sheath of ignorance from the object. So the vṛtti goes and hits. The moment it hits, the veiling, the cover, the sheath, the ignorance of the object is removed. Now, the associated consciousness, the consciousness illumines the object by taking the form of the object. So now the thought function hits, removes the ignorance, the object turns in, the consciousness turns into, illumines it, therefore it turns into the object form. Okay. Now object associated consciousness, thought function associated consciousness, and the knower associated consciousness, they are all in same plane, same object. So I say I know pot. Only when they are in same plane, same object, I can say I know. Otherwise, you cannot say you know. Okay. Now, the thought function, when it hits the vṛtti, when it hits the object, its only job is to get rid of the ignorance sheath, right? but it does not get extinguished, because like when you launch a rocket, it hits a target, immediately the rockets also burst, the flame also goes off, right? But here, this rocket of vṛtti goes and hits the object. It doesn't get destroyed, because the place where it hits is also ignorance. So it just removes the ignorance sheath, and being associated with the consciousness, it wields the object. It covers the object. It grabs the object. It takes the form of the object. Okay. Now, this is with reference to any object. Pot associated consciousness, vṛtti goes, hits, removes the wheeling. The vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu chaitanya takes the form of pot. Cloth, vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu chaitanya takes the form of cloth. That is what is said here. Arthākāra bhavet. When the vṛtti goes and hits the viṣaya, the object, that is a phalena arthah prakāśate. Phalena means caitanyam. The consciousness which is associated with the thought function, it illumines the object. Therefore, the thought function as though becomes the form of the object. We know now how the object is understood. Objects, any object. So, when you meditate, you turn this thought function inwards. Now, it goes to the source. It has to get rid of the ignorance at the source, because your heart space, the heart cavity, which is the place of manifestation of self, is veiled by ignorance, right? So, this thought function's only job is to go and get rid of that ignorance. It will do that. What happens then? The consciousness also, the thought functions illumines that self, and therefore the thought function becomes the form of the self. Therefore, no, that is not what happens there. This is entirely different. Okay, let us see. vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu phalavyāptiḥ kathaṃ bhavet svaprakāśasvarūpatvātsiddhatvācca cidātmanaḥ. Beautiful. vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu phalavyāptiḥ kathaṃ bhavet svaprakāśasvarūpatvātsiddhatvācca cidātmanaḥ. I have not heard vṛttivyāpti, phalavyāpti in a simple text like this. Even after studying Vedanta, many people don't understand this vṛttivyāpti and phalavyāpti idea. It's a beautiful thing. vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu. Vṛttivyāpyatam means the activity of vṛtti. Vṛttivyāpya means the pervasion, etc. No, forget about that. Vṛttivyāpyatam means the activity of vṛtti. Let the activity of vṛtti alone remain. Phalavyāpti kathaṃ bhavet. How can there be the activity of phala, result, consciousness? Phala, consciousness, we decided in the earlier sloka. Okay? Phalena arthah prakāśate. With the consciousness associated with the thought function, the object is illumined. So, vṛtti, thought function, phala, consciousness. Okay? Now, here, when the thought function is turned inwards to the source, then what happens is vṛttivyāpti, the activity of the thought function that takes place. What is the activity of thought function? What is the only activity of thought function? To remove the ignorance veiling. That's done. Now, the consciousness in the heart, which is veiled by the ignorance, that is removed. Okay? Then the consciousness behind the thought function does not illuminate, because this self, devoid of ignorance, is self-effulgent. It does not expect any other effulgence. So, like you don't use a torch light to see, or a match stick to see if the sun is the sun or not. No. Similarly, here, when the thought function removes the vṛtti removes the ignorance feeling over. In fact, under the sun, your matchstick, whether it's burning or not, itself will not be visible. Right? Similarly, this consciousness of the thought is very small conscious, whereas this self is self-effulgent. Tasya bhāsā sarmidam bhāti vino. It is because of its effulgence, everything is illumined. So this gets this consciousness does not objectify, engulf, See, outside the consciousness engulfs the object and became the form of the object. Thought associated consciousness turned into the form of the object. Here, thought hits the ignorance, then the consciousness does not exist there. It does not objectify. Why? There are two things different from the pot knowledge and the self-knowledge. One, the thought travels, thought associated consciousness, vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu travels outside or inside. That is common. No problem. Outside, the thought function removes the ignorance feeling. Inside, the thought function removes the ignorance feeling. Same. No problem there. But outside, since the object is also of ignorance, there is the thought function remains. It doesn't get extinguished. Whereas inside, the feeling is ignorance of the self. Feeling of the self is ignorance. Not ignorance of object, pot, caught, etc. Ignorance of self. So once that ignorance is removed, then the thought function, which is an effect of ignorance, cannot exist. Okay? So thought function outside stays, thought function inside gets extinguished. This is first difference. Second difference is consciousness objectifies the external object. Consciousness does not objectify, it does not exist. The thought itself is removed. Thought is now thought no is. Thought does not exist. Now thought is earlier. Now thought no is. So what happens is there is no thought associated consciousness also. So there is no objectifying to the consciousness. Because self is self-effulgent, that itself is what is necessary to remove the screen. Once you remove the screen, the light is already visible. You don't need another light to illuminate, right? So that is why he says, vṛttivyāpyatvamevāstu. Let there be only the activity of thought. Phalavyāptiḥ kathaṃ bhavet. How can there be the activity of consciousness? The activity of thought function is to remove the feeling. Activity of consciousness is to engulf. So there is no need for that. Cidātmanaḥ svaprakāśasvarūpatvātsiddhatvācca. Why? Because the cidātmanaḥ, the self, is a cid, jnana swarupa, of the nature of knowledge. The self, which is of the inherent nature of knowledge, is effulgent, self-effulgent. Svaprakāśasvarūpatvātsiddhatvācca is self-effulgent. That is why we said, tasya bhāsā sarvamidam vibhāti. Everything else shines because of this self. Okay? It does not require any other effulgence to illuminate. One. Reason number one. Reason number two, cittaṃ. Siddhavastu. It is already existent. Your consciousness does not go and illuminate and make it existent. No. It does not create. Your thought associated consciousness does not create it. Your thought associated consciousness does not make it exist. It is ever existing. Or siddhatvat, add a pra upasarga, pra suffix, prefix to it, then prasiddhatvat. It is famous. Tasya bhāsā sarvamidam. In this way, it is famous being self-effulgent. It is not dependent on anything. This is famous. So that is why he says. Okay. Now, this is what is the difference between vṛttivyāpti and phalavyāpti. Vṛttivyāpti means the thought function alone functions. The activity of thought function alone exists. Phalavyāpti, the activity of the consciousness associated with the thought function also exists. In the external object, both thought function and consciousness are active. With respect to the internal self, only the thought function is active, not the consciousness. Okay, now we know this. Next, cittaṃ caitanyamātreṇa saṃyogāccetanā bhavet arthādarthāntare vṛttirgantuṃ calati cāntare nirādhārā nirvikārā yadā sonmanī smṛtā. Cittaṃ caitanyamātreṇa saṃyogāt cetanam bhavet arthādarthāntare vṛttirgantuṃ calati cāntare nirādhārā nirvikārā yadā so unmanī smṛtā. This is a state called unmanī. That is what is extolled here. Unmanī, utkrishtamani. Utkrishtamani means utkrishta manas, where the mind is a superior mind. That is the state which is explained here. Okay. It's a very dangerous topic to monkeys. I'll explain this. Cittaṃ caitanyamātreṇa saṃyogāt cetana bhavet. Cittaṃ, citta, citta means what is citta? What is citta? Maṇah, buddhi, ahankara, cittaṃ, right? Maṇau, buddhi, ahankara, citta. So citta is also an activity of the antakarana, the functionality of an antakarana. Therefore, it is also mind. So instead of citta, you understand it is mind. He uses the word citta to for word plays. Later he will do the word play. We'll see that. But now citta means mind. Mind, because of the association with the consciousness, caitanyamātreṇa, only the association of consciousness, pure consciousness. Caitanyamātreṇa means pure consciousness. Mind, inert mind, because of the association with pure consciousness, saṃyogāt, cetana bhavet, becomes consciousness. Okay, that means mind, in as though association with consciousness, is seen as though conscious. Mind is inert. It can never be conscious. A. Consciousness can never have association with anything. Asango hi ayam brushaha. It is already declared. Consciousness untouchable, unassociated. So there can be no association with consciousness. So the consciousness association is also a illusion. So mind in the superimposition with consciousness, seen as a consciousness. Okay, that is done. Now, next is vṛttihi. We are coming to the vṛtti, the thought function, the transformation of mind. What happens to the mind? Arthādarthāntare gantuṃ calati. The nature of mind, monkey, I said, right? That is what is monkey. So the nature of mind is to run from calati, to go from arthādarthāntare, from one object, artha, to arthāntare, to another object. Arthād, fifth case, from one object, arthāntare, to another object. That is the nature of mind. Gantuṃ calati, it runs from one object to another object. Like monkey travels from one to another, this mind keeps on traveling from one to another. Okay. There is that is why I call it monkey is it leaves the previous branch, jumps to the other branch. It does not hold on like a leech, old leaf and new leaf. No, it starts from this branch and jumps to the other branch. Okay. Now, let us take a small kid. This baby, when it's playing with multiple toys, it will take one toy, it will play, it will throw that, take another toy, play with it, throw that. So that is how the kids play with the toys. It doesn't take one and then it's a rare occasion. It plays with one and it takes another and throws this. No, it takes this one, plays with this, throws that and takes another one. Okay, that is the normal course. Now, mind takes an object, plays with it, throws it, takes another object, plays with it, throws it. That's what the nature of mind is. If it is with pot, it throw that, it will be cloth, it will throw that, it will be table, throw that, things like that. Okay. Now, from one object to another object travels. That's the nature of mind. Okay. Now, daśā antare ca daśā nirādhārā nirvikārā. In between, antare means in between. In between, there's a one object to another object. There is a space, there is a gap. In between that gap, there is a state which is a nirādhārā, supportless, meaning without any object, without pot, cloth, etc. objects. And nirvikārā, without any transformation of thought function. So, a state where the mind does not transform to thought function, where the mind does not hold on to an object, that state, sa daśā, that is the state we are talking about. Like when we said about the logicians, they have this this dictum which says utpannam kshanam dravyam nishkriyam nirgunam cha tishtati. At the time of a manifestation, creation, this object remains activityless and attributeless. When the milk turns to curd, in between there is a stage where there is no milk, no curd. There is no activity, there is no attribute. Okay. So similarly is the situation of the mind. When the mind is in between two transformations, at that state, it is devoid of any object and devoid of any activity. Okay. Now, daśā unmanī smṛtā, that state is called a superior mind. Unmanī, superior than mind. This is a state which is normally during the meditation thing and all, normally this is a practice which is taught. We don't teach that. Don't do it. I'm explaining it, but don't do it because your mind is monkey. So when I say this, your mind is monkey. Now, when I say this, you will become monkey. I'll do that. I'll try that. Don't try this. This is useless. You will lose whatever you have. Think this. What is this? Why am I warning so much? I'll explain this. When you initiate somebody into mantra, we say do as much as japa you can. Okay. Now, during this period, the japa is to be done like in loads, like 100,000, like that. Okay, a million, billion, etc. No. You take this mantra, you chant. Okay, Namah Shivaya. Let us say simple mantra. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. I'm going to chant Namah Shivaya like this because I have to complete the number. Now, when I complete the number, the mind has been it's stuck with this mantra. It cannot forget the mantra. So we tell the person who chanted this for a huge number, for a big number, now we tell him, stop, don't be so fast, slow it. Okay, watch the mantra carefully. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. This is the best way to chant actually. Om Namah Shivaya. This you can do. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Now, this is a continuous process. Your mind is fixated in the mantra. It knows, it is seeing the mantra. Okay. Mind is generating the mantra, it is seeing the mantra in front of it. Om Namah Shivaya. Each Om Namah Shivaya it sees. Now comes the dangerous part, which is, we say, there is a gap between one mantra and another mantra. Arthādarthāntare, one object and another object. Here the object is mantra. Between one mantra and another mantra, there is a gap. Now, watch that gap. Om Namah Shivaya, gap. Om Namah Shivaya, there is a gap. Om Namah Shivaya, there is a gap. Om Namah Shivaya, gap. Om Namah Shivaya, gap. Om Namah Shivaya, gap. Om Namah Shivaya. I chant slowly, I extend the gap. That gap is also what I'm focusing. I'm not just focusing on the mantra, I'm also focusing on the gap in between. That is what we say. Because that is the state where there is no object, there is no transformation. The mind is resting in peace. Actually, that is what is rest in peace. The mind rests in peace. Now there is no activity or object. That is what is called a superior mind. Superior than mind. A state which is superior than mind. Unmanī. Now, why we don't? I am giving a stationary warning again and again and again because we have not done enough mantra japa. Our mind is a monkey. It will always want something new, attracted to this. Oh, let me try this. The problem is you will lose whatever you have been doing. Why? the gap, instead of slowly doing it, you will want to extend the gap. Om Namah Shivaya. I watch the gap. Beautiful. Very good. Very good. Very good. What is happening now? Now, instead of watching the gap, you are watching a movie inside. Because the mind is not habituated to stay without any activity. So, it will start spinning stories. That is what we call as a maṇau. There are different stages. This is one stage. This is divasvapna, daydreaming. Okay. Manorajya. In Sanskrit, we call it as manorajya. So, mind creates a kingdom. It starts spinning stories. You will be pulled into that story. So, now the only thing is we need to continue doing japa as we do. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya without minding the gap. Okay. Now, that is what is important. That's what is unmani avastha. Now, cittaṃ, ciditi. Why he said citta instead of manas, instead of buddhi, he said citta, because buddhi is seen as effulgent, and it is because of the association of the effulgent self. It is easy to say, but he said citta. Why? Because cittaṃ ciditi jānīyāttakārarahitaṃ yadā, takāro viṣayādhyāso japārāgo yathā maṇau. Cittaṃ ciditi jānīyāt takārarahitaṃ yadā, takāro viṣayādhyāso japārāgo yathā maṇau. There is a word play. I said he is going to do that word play later. This is what's the word play. Like when we say Shiva, Shiva without the E, which is Shakti, he will be Shava. Shiva means auspicious. Shava means dead, inauspicious. Right? So Shiva without the E Shakti, Ikara Shakti, he will be Shava. He will not be alive. That's a word play. Similarly, a word play here is a cittaṃ, chit. Okay? Citta means a mind. Chit means consciousness. Remember that. Okay? Cittaṃ yadā takārarahitam. When the citta is devoid of one takara, one ta, what happens? Citta. You remove the ta, it becomes chit. Ciditi jānīyāt. No, the citta without the takara becomes chit. So remember this. Takara. What is the takara? Takara is a viṣayādhyāso, association, the superimposition of the objects. Superimposition of the objects. There are two superimpositions. One is superimposition of the objects. Then there is superimposition of the, see, viṣayādhyāso is object actually, attributes actually. So there are two states. One is a superimposition of the object and superimposition of the attributes of the object. Okay. Now viṣayādhyāso means the attributes. Viṣayi means the object itself. But viṣaya we are used to translating it as object. Okay. Now we will see this as the attribute of the object. How? See, when you have this particle, this glass or this crystal ball, you place it on a red cloth or in front of a hibiscus. What happens? The red color of the hibiscus is superimposed on the crystal, and you see the crystal as red crystal. The attribute of the hibiscus is superimposed on the crystal. This is viṣayādhyāso. If you superimpose that japakusma, that hibiscus itself on the red the crystal, and see it as hibiscus, then is viṣayādhyāso. Okay, this is the difference in adhyasa. Viṣayādhyāso and viṣayādhyāso. Okay, viṣayādhyāso means superimposition of attributes. Viṣayādhyāso means superimposition of attributed. Okay, now we see the superimposition of attributes. That is why he says yathā maṇau japārāgo. Like in the crystal, the color of the raga, the color of the japa hibiscus is superimposed. Like that, you see the takara is viṣayādhyāso, superimposition of objects on the self. Okay. Now, this is the beauty here. The mind in itself is inert. It does not have any consciousness. Like a lamp without light. Once you lit it, that lamp becomes capable of starting the other lamps which are not lit, unlit lamps. It can light up the other unlit lamps. Okay. Similarly, this mind, which is inert, is not conscious. When it is associated with that consciousness, chit, then it behaves as though it is also chit, it is also conscious. And it starts associating everything and giving it a conscious twist. Okay, that is what it says. So the superimposition of object is what is the object means. The superimposition of the attributes or the object is what is the problem. Now, superimposition, viṣayādhyāso, we know this. So he says takāra is the superimposition of the objects, because of which we see the chit to be cittaṃ. When you give up that association with the superimposition of the objects, then when there is no association with the objects, that's the difference between the ignorant and the realist. The ignorant one associate himself with the objects. The realist is not associated with the objects. That's the difference. Okay. Now, jānīyāt viṣayādhyāso. Okay, we'll see this. Om purnamadah purnamidam purnāt purnamudachyate purnasya purnamādāya purnamevāvaṣishyate. Om shanti shanti shanti.